Hello and welcome to The Round So Far, brought to you by AAMI. I'm Riley Beveridge. This is Kate McCarthy. Kate, it's been a great weekend of action so far. Let's kick off the night at NG Stadium because the big story was the Giants' comeback, and it was inspired by this man, Cal Ward, whose career hangs in the balance tonight after a really horrible knee injury. He got around the boys at three-quarter time, and then they came back from 28 points down at three-quarter time.
Yeah, they did, and Richmond did not score after the Tom Lynch goal at the 13-minute mark of the third quarter. It was an onslaught in the third term from the Orange Tsunami, who finally got going. Richmond, you've got to give credit where it's due. They were very good in the first three quarters of this match, and sometimes it's a little bit more difficult when the other team just has nothing to lose and throws caution to the wind, especially this GWS team, that when they want to go, they can go and they can play fast football, and that's exactly what they needed to do in the fourth quarter, and that's what they did to get the job done.
We saw Callum Ward addressing his troops at three-quarter time. He was the story out of this one, following this really disappointing knee injury. Now, he's returned to the Giants. He's playing another year this year. He's chasing his first ever grand final berth. But as I said before, his career hangs in the balance because if that's an ACL, you'd have to think Callum Ward, after 327 brilliant games, could be done. Yeah,
and these were really emotional scenes. Obviously, what he means to that club there is bigger than what football is. He's the current games record holder at GWS, and whether or not his career is done now with that ACL, he's spoken quite openly about this being his last season of football, and that his family's back in Melbourne and he wanted to have another tilt at a flag. But it's really disappointing season. I think we saw tonight the highs and lows of football, and that was definitely one of the lows that we've seen for the season. So you feel like, though, Cal Ward, what he's offered to footy, his job is not done in football, whether it's playing in that capacity, but he is going to be a big part of a club that might want to take him after this for his career post-football as well. Yeah,
it's heartbreaking for Callum Ward, given how much he's done for that football club at the Giants. The Giants got a giant scare, though, because Richmond took it to them, especially through the first three quarters. They shot out into a 34-point lead late in the third term, and it was off the back of their clearance dominance, which the Giants resurrected in the last quarter.
Yeah, that was the area that they needed to tidy up. It wasn't only that they were dominant in clearances, but GWS weren't able to defend those scores from that clearance source. So 33 points from clearance, Richmond, in quarters 1 to 3. They were held goalless. They only had 2 more clearances in the fourth quarter, but GWS's ability to not only stop Richmond scoring, but to score themselves 4 goals won, that was the difference in the end of the game in the fourth quarter.
And their first three quarters were inspired by a couple of former Giants in Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto. Hopper, 29 disposals and 13 clearances. Taranto, 23 disposals and 2 goals. Against their former side, they put on a show.
Yeah, they certainly did, and you have a little bit more to give when you're playing against your old side, and that's exactly what was on display from both Taranto and Hopper. Taranto's first quarter alone, 11 disposals, 5 of those contested, 4 inside 50s and 2 goals to go with it. So the two of them, they were great. Hopper obviously around clearance, and added Dion Prestia to the mix as well, who was in his first senior match of the season. So the three of those through the midfield, they did their best to try and will their team over the line, but unfortunately for the Tigers fans, they just couldn't quite get the job done in the fourth quarter.
Let's head to the SCG now in a night of 2 extremes for Adelaide and Sydney. Start with the good. That was with the Crows. They absolutely dominated this one. They won by 90 points, and some of their attacking footy was the best we've seen all year.
Yeah, their attack was really, really impressive, especially in that first half when the game was there to be won and they took it to Sydney. They ended up scoring 88 points from turnover alone, but the impressive part, their attack was good, but their defence was really, really good as well. They kept their pressure rating over 208 for the entire match, and Isaac Rankin, little moments of that, but this was really good. You're going to see this replayed so many times. Obviously, Josh Rochelle, we know his past as a football player or a soccer player, how we want to refer to it in this country, but that was just, it was brilliant. It was deliberate and it was brilliant. Got it out into space, and Ben Keys, who also had a very impressive match, he had the match up on Blakey. He had 17 disposals himself, 11 contested and 3 goals. Nick Blakey, on the other hand, 9 disposals and kept him to just 237 metres gained. So being able to win that contest gives your side a really good upper hand, and then when you're able to score 3 goals on the back of it, we saw Jake Melksham do it to Harris Andrews, and that defensive forward role is worth its weight in gold, especially when you can hit the scoreboard.
He's one of the best in the comp at that defensive forward role. That's the good. Let's get to the bad now. And Sydney, for a side that's made 2 of the last 3 grand finals, geez, they can cop some beltings. There's another one here tonight, so 90 points to Adelaide. This is in that period where they've made a couple of grand finals. You can see here, 5 defeats by 10 goals or more. Tonight adds to that. And they're in a really weird spot. Dean Cox, first year as coach, they've gone through a lot of turbulence over the off-season with John Longmire departing abruptly. How do you rate this season? Do you give it a mulligan given the injury issues that they've had?
I think it's the combination of two. So you've got Dean Cox in his first year as a senior coach at the club, and then you've got some key injuries. Yes, Errol Goulden, but their forward line's been pretty depleted for a whole lot of this season. But their inability to defend scores as well this year has been the question mark. So I think it's one of those ones where the combination of the two makes it really difficult for them to get any momentum and any continuity. I don't think that the loss this evening really, maybe by the margin of it, surprised people. But the way that they've been playing, you're sort of never sure who's going to show up for Sydney. And they've put together some very good performances, but they've put together some very poor performances as well. And tonight was another one of those. Yeah,
you mentioned their forward line issues. Joel Amartey, Logan McDonald, Tom Papley, all out of that side. So some issues there for the Swans going forward. All right, good, bad. What about the ugly? Josh Rachele, is he going to be facing a staging fine for this? Because he found it funny. I found it funny watching at home. He knew exactly what he'd done to con the umpire here.
Well, to be fair, the umpire's right there and has the view of that and is still paid 50. So I think, I don't know, you can't really pick what staging fines are going to be given. Ben Hobbs copped one this season and he actually was hit in the head. So I don't know what we're going to get from the MRO with the staging fine. But if he's good enough to, I guess, convince the umpire, who's standing right there, mind you, that he's been hit in the head and gets 50. A bit cheeky. He said post-game that he loves playing on Dane Rampy because the two of them just seem to poke the bear a lot. But, yeah, he got the best of that one.
All right, let's head to Gold Coast where Freo got an important win. And I'll tell you what, there was a moment in this third term where they were being challenged. You can see the scoreline there. They'd controlled it early, the Dockers, but then the Suns had got themselves back in front. And when you look at them here on the spread, I thought they were done at this point because you can see a whole bunch of Freo players just lagging behind. They looked out in their legs. It was a tough, wet day. I thought they were done at this point, but the way they responded to this was fantastic.
Yeah, and all through the game, they were able to wrestle back little patches of momentum, and Brayshaw was one of those players that had a hand in most of those moments that they needed just to find something. And it was a really good win for the Dockers in really difficult conditions on the Gold Coast. But the ebbs and flows of the game through Brayshaw, Sarong, Jordan Clark, and even Fife, when he came on as the sub, he had a very good fourth term, 7 disposals, 1 tackle and 1 clearance. But when the game's on the line, they're the things that you need to rely on. And they rolled up the sleeves, they got to work, and this last play, Shea Bolton, really good chase down tackle, and then Jai Amos good enough to finish off to be 11 points up at the end of the game. And that was just the exclamation mark and the ecstasy and the agony. That is how we're going to sum up those two clips. Dimmer and Longmuir there, really just one of those moments that they needed to find something, but there were multiple of those during the game. So if you look at the timeline at three-quarter time, all the way through, so they held the lead at every change, but three-quarter time they were up 13. But the first 10 minutes of that third quarter, the Gold Coast Suns owned. They were able to get back to a 1-point lead, which was the score that we saw at the start of that clip. But then the last 9 clearance of the third term Freo got, and they ended up with a 13-point advantage at three-quarter time. They ended up with the 11-point lead at full time, but they were able to just find another gear. The Gold Coast Suns pushed them, but Freo, they were able to just get their noses in front when they needed to, which has been something we've probably haven't seen a whole lot of from them this season. And now they've won 3 on the trot. Their next 3 are all at home, so they have a bye next week. They're 7-5. Their next 3 opponents are North, Essendon and St Kilda. So they are sitting in a much better spot, and I've been critical on them this year, and I think some of their performances probably warranted that. But what we saw this afternoon on the Gold Coast was what a lot of us have expected to see from Fremantle. So if they can keep that up, they are well within the hunt to finish in the top 8. Yeah,
they could very easily be 10-5 after that next month that they've got ahead of them. A flashpoint late in this game with Dan Rioli and Andy Brayshaw. You can see it here. Questions around whether or not the MRO could have a look at this, but I want you to take a look at Shea Bolton in the moments just leading up to this. I think this is what might save Dan Rioli in the end. You can see Shea Bolton comes in there, gives him a slight shove into the contest. I think that's probably what saves Dan Rioli in the end from a visit to the match review on Sunday afternoon. Matt Rowell also reported in this game, but we're expecting that one to be thrown out relatively quickly on Sunday morning. All right, Kate, you're Saturday king now. Pat Voss, you love him. He was fantastic.
Oh, the aura of the man. He has one of the biggest chests in football, and even if it's not, he puffs it out like it should be. He has some real energy about him, Patrick Voss. plus the 7 disposals, 8 tackles, which is one of the things that you love seeing from a player that plays as that key position role in some capacity at Fremantle. But I just love the way he goes about his football. On Bailey Humphrey here, just really tries to show him who's boss. He struts around like he owns the ground, and 3 goals, which is a career high for him. He played a very important hand in this game, but whether he did or not, he acted like he did, and that's what I love about him.
He's starting to become a bit of a cult hero at the Dockers as well, which you love. We also loved this. It's our moment of the weekend, and it came from the Gold Coast debutant in Leo Lombard, kicking his first goal in AFL footy. He's got such high raps on him, but have a look at the celebration, Kate. He wanted every single person in this stadium to join in with him.
Well, even if they didn't, he was going to run to them and make sure that he did, and then he continued it. Most people say don't come off after you've kicked a goal, but if you're going to celebrate like this, come off after every goal that you kick. GPS numbers would look good after that one as well, so he's very clever in his celebrations, but good on him. He's waited a while to make his debut. Obviously was very highly touted to play in round 1, round 0. Obviously didn't eventuate, but had that shoulder injury in the pre-season game against the Brisbane Lions. So he's waited for that moment, and they're the highs of football, aren't we? We saw the lows with Callum Ward, but they're the highs of football.
He was fantastic, Leo Lombard, with that goal. All right, let's get to Friday night footy. Collingwood against Hawthorn, and the Pies absolutely trounced them. Not an upset, but I think the surprise was the margin of the victory and the ease that Collingwood was able to transition the ball from one end of the field to the other across the course of the night.
Yeah, their transition was on full display. They're number 1 in the comp now for percentage of scores inside forward 50, and it was their efficiency going forward, their ability to know when to use a forward handball or when to take grass and hit a target that's further afield. And the Hawks really struggled to defend the scores from turnover, also leaked a lot of scores from stoppage. So it was there. Yes, Hawthorn were disappointing, which we'll get to in a minute, but you cannot take anything away from Collingwood. Again, this forward handball on display till the point where they get out and see an option further afield, use the targets. And yeah, Jamie Elliott, who is just having another one of those seasons. Yeah. I think his best season in Collingwood colours, which sounds crazy seeing as he's into his 14th year as a Collingwood Magpie, but there's only been 3 seasons previous to this where he's kicked over 33 goals, and there's still 12 games to go in this season. So I think he's got to be All-Australian at this stage in the season. There's no question about that. He's now equal leading the Coleman. Obviously, Jeremy Cameron and Ben King have a game in hand, but I've been nothing but impressed by him, and there's so many veterans at that club that just seem to be getting better and better in season 2025.
He's been fantastic. 23 goals in his last 6 games as well. What about Hawthorn's lack of tackle pressure? They were minus 44 in tackle differential. And you notice something here around corralling rather than tackling. Yeah,
so this is the moment Blake Hardwick has to go and make Dacos either make a decision, and then again, this is where Morrison needs to go, make a decision. Because he doesn't go and he corrals, that puts Ginnivan in 2 minds as to whether he comes forward and presses or whether he drops back. And again, this one here, this is Jamie Elliott just sort of shrugging off a player. And if you're going to give a player like that much space inside forward 50, you need to be better than that. And then again here, Nick Watson, another missed tackle that leads directly to a score involvement. So it's not just those players, obviously, that we've highlighted. It's all across the ground, and their tackle differentials in the last 4 weeks have been quite astounding. They only laid 36 tackles against Brisbane. Yeah. They had 9 players that didn't lay a single tackle on the field. And the other area where they're unable to assert any pressure is their tackles in the forward 50. So they actually had 1 more inside 50 than Collingwood in this game. Mm-hmm. The Hawks laid 4 tackles in their forward 50. Collingwood laid 13. Yeah. So when you're a team that bases your attack on chaos and turnover from the opposition, which is exactly what Collingwood did to Hawthorn, you can't generate turnover if you're not generating any pressure on the ball carrier.
Minus 44 in tackles is the 7th largest differential since Champion Data began taking that stat. Here's Sam Mitchell, Hawthorn coach, speaking after the game.
You know, I think it was pretty clear to everyone that was here and those watching at home that, you know, we're at this point miles off it. That Collingwood team are super sharp, and they're, you know, we played Brisbane last week and they were very good as well, but that was another level today. So that's what we need to aspire to and above to beat them when it matters.
Where do you think Hawthorn's at? Because 3 straight losses now, all to good sides, Collingwood, Brisbane and Gold Coast. But they're 1-5 against top 8 teams. They look to me like they're And I'm not saying this is a bad thing because 18 months ago you wouldn't have said they should be in this position, but they look to me like they're the 8th to 10th best side in the competition.
Yeah, and I think that's what Sam Mitchell's point is there. They're not playing like they're a team that should be sort of in and around the position or the top 4 position where a lot of people have had them this season. They're not playing their best football. They haven't worked out how they can best get it all together as a team across 3 quarters, across all lines of the field. And their next 2 are really pivotal games. They've got the Doggies at Marvel on Thursday night, who are coming off a bye. And then they've got the Crows at UTAS down in Tassie on a Friday night. So we said sort of coming into this run that we'd know a lot about Hawthorn. Well, the next 2 weeks, we're going to know even more about them. I'm surprised post-game that Jack Ginnivan said that was the time they had the conversation, bring your mouthguards to training. I thought that would have happened last week after a very disappointing loss in and around the contest against Brisbane, a lack of pressure, couldn't win clearance, couldn't win contested possession. I just find it interesting that it's now happening a week for me, a little bit late, because they should have been wound up like that to play Collingwood. Whether or not it did happen last week and we haven't been privy to that information, that's another question. But for me, it was a statement game on Friday night and they weren't able to make that statement.
It's going to be a massive night on Thursday night against the Western Bulldogs here at Marvel Stadium. Lloyd Meek involved in a contentious incident with Pat Lipinski, who suffered a concussion as a result of this. The MRO looked at it and said that he couldn't have done anything to stop Lipinski getting the concussion, given that his head hits the turf at the end of it, and that he was actually contesting the football. The spoiling hand didn't go towards the ball, didn't deviate away from the ball, and that he had his eyes on the ball the whole time. So he's got no case to answer for there. All right, AAMI Clangers for Good is back for the 2025 AFL season. And this year, it isn't just open to footy clubs. It's for all AFL fans. If you've got a footy-related clanger, whether at home, at a game or at the club, AAMI want to hear about it. Head to afl.com.au/AAMI Clangers for Good. Share your clanger and you could be in with a chance to share in $100,000. All right, let's head to Thursday night footy. Brisbane getting the job done against Essendon. The storyline going into this one was Essendon missing 10 players of 190 centimetres or more. This was the starting matchups with Brisbane's forward line, so not too much of a height discrepancy here. So the game was going to be won in a different sort of area, and the Bombers actually took it to the Lions for a lot of the night. Yeah,
they did. They took it to the Lions in stoppage, and that was the area they needed to win so that some of these undermanned or undersized matchups didn't really hurt them, and that's what they did. They were able to do this. They held balance around stoppage. So if one player from the Lions got it done or won the footy, they made sure that only one bomber went to that player so they could hold that balance around stoppage. And what that means is if the Lions win it, you've got good defensive structure. But if you win it, you've also got the ability to do this, and that's score from stoppage. So I was really impressed. And coming into this game, the Lions were the #1 team at stoppage in 2025. And in the fourth quarter, that's where they were able to get their dominance back on track. So they had +4 stoppages in the fourth term. And this man here, Hugh McCluggage, he was, for me, the best on ground. He is becoming one of their, if not their most important midfielder, just with the sense of what it adds to their midfield. So Josh Dunkley plays that defensive role, extremely underrated, in my opinion, what he does for the Brisbane Lions week in, week out. Lachie Neale has obviously always been that in and under, first hands on the footy, get it out to a user or win the clearance himself. But now Hugh McCluggage is as prolific at winning the footy and getting the clearances. So he had 12 score involvements, 41 disposals and 7 clearances with 2 goal assists directly from him. He's someone that now they have to make a decision when they're playing the Brisbane Lions, the opponent. Are we going to tag Neale? Are we going to tag McCluggage? And if we don't tag one of them, the other's going to get off the chain. So I've been nothing but impressed by Hugh McCluggage. And for me, he's in the All-Australian squad at this stage of the season.
He's never made a team. I think he's made 4 squads without making a team. I reckon if he's even a sneaky Brownlow chance. Are you comfortable with where Brisbane's at? Reigning Premier. Last year they finished outside the top 4. So you got to balance it with the fact that if they run hot for a month in September, they can clearly still win the flag. But had that big loss to Melbourne at home a couple of weeks ago, and we just nudged over the line against Essendon here, a really undermanned Essendon. How do you think they're travelling?
Yeah, well, the first quarter of that game, it was Brisbane by how much? They were up by 32 points. And to Essendon's credit, they were actually able to wrestle back a fair bit of momentum in that game. But I think Brisbane of a few seasons ago would have let that game slip. They wouldn't have been able to find a way to get back on top in that game, even despite who Essendon were missing in those key position stocks. So 5-day break, you give them a little bit of a win or an out for that in a way. I think the difference between this year and last year is they're banking the wins. They just keep rolling on, getting the wins on the board.
Yep.
They're definitely not playing their best football just yet, week in, week out. I think we saw the best of them last week against the Hawks. Another little blip this week against Essendon, but they're sitting pretty. They're in the second position and not playing their best football. So they've still got 12 rounds to tidy that up, look at what it looks like, get their team balance right, and they'll still be a force to be reckoned with late in the season.
All right, let's have a look ahead to the rest of the round now. Footy returns to Alice Springs to start Sunday's action. Melbourne against St Kilda from TIO Traeger Park, and then West Coast against Geelong from Optus Stadium to finish off round 12. Kate, it's been great to finally work with you again, and we'll see you next week on The Round So Far.